You are on HOA debrief. She tried to turn neighbors into witnesses against me. You just earned yourself a deadline. That was Lori Hastings, Vice President of the Desert Palms Community Association, standing on my driveway in Tampa, jabbing her finger at my doorbell camera and screaming that my footage was illegal and her accusation was legal. She had a ring of keys in her other hand, and she was jingling them like a weapon. I stood there with my arms crossed, barely keeping my voice level, and told her the camera was on my property and pointed at my door. She did not care. She leaned closer and said, "I am the one who decides what counts." I asked her what that meant. She said a neighbor's car was rummaged through last night, and she saw my silhouette in the parking area around midnight. I told her I was home all night. She said she saw me. I said, "Prove it." She laughed and said I already confessed, and now I owed the HOA $500 in emergency fines starting tomorrow unless I admitted it again on the record. I work as a security technician. I install cameras, configure access logs, and audit footage for commercial clients. I know what evidence looks like, and I know what a setup smells like. This was a setup. Lori was stacking a story on top of nothing, and she was doing it fast. She said the next delivery for the clubhouse was arriving today, and if I did not pay by then, she would intercept it and hold it as collateral. I asked her what delivery. She said signage pieces for the new parking rules, and the HOA had already paid for them. I told her I had nothing to do with any delivery. She smiled and said I confessed, so it did not matter. She pulled out her phone, flipped it to record, and started narrating into the lens like she was filing a police report. She said she was documenting my refusal to cooperate and my hostile body language. She said she was reporting me to police and that this video would be evidence. I stayed quiet. I knew she was performing. She wanted me to yell so she could clip it and send it to the board. I did not give her the footage. A neighbor walked past to grab mail from the cluster box near the street. Lori turned and waved him over. She said she wanted a witness. The neighbor, an older guy named Ed, stopped and asked what was going on. Lori said I stole packages from the clubhouse and rummaged through cars, and I confessed this morning. Ed looked at me. I said I did not confess to anything. Lori said I was lying now and that she had witnesses. Ed looked uncomfortable and walked away without saying anything. Lori smiled and said that was fine, she would add him to the complaint list anyway. I went inside and locked the door. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the Desert Palms Management Portal with the subject line, "Violation Notice." I opened it. The notice said I was fined $500 for theft of association property, effective immediately, and if I did not pay within 48 hours, I would be fined an additional $250 per day until resolution. The notice said I confessed to board leadership, and that the confession was recorded. It was not recorded, because it never happened. I run a home-based IT security consulting business with a city business license tied to this address. The HOA knows that. If Lori gets the city to believe I am stealing from neighbors, they can revoke my license and kill my income. That is the stakes. She knows it, and she is using it. I pulled up my own doorbell footage and scrubbed back to midnight. I was on my couch the entire night. My car did not move. I checked my gate fob log from the community access portal, and my fob was not used between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. I screenshotted both and saved them to a folder. The next morning, Lori was waiting at the mailbox cluster when I walked down to grab my mail. She had her rolling cart with color-coded binders and a clear sleeve clipboard with a date box highlighted. She waved the clipboard at me and said the deadline was tomorrow at noon. I asked her what deadline. She said the fine deadline, and after that she would authorize a tow vendor to deny me entry unless I paid the balance in full. I said she could not do that. She said I am the one who decides what counts, and I already decided. 3 other residents were pulling mail from their boxes. Lori raised her voice and said she wanted everyone to know there was a thief in the community, and that I had confessed. One woman, a younger resident named Angela, turned and stared. Lori said I stole clubhouse signage and rummaged through cars, and the board was taking action. Angela looked at me. I said none of that was true. Lori said I confessed this morning on my driveway. Angela said she did not hear anything. Lori said she had it on video. Angela walked away. Lori turned back to me and said the rumor was already moving, and I could either pay or let it destroy me. I went to the management office, a small leasing-style building near the front gate. The property manager, a tired woman in her 50s named Diane, was behind the desk. I showed her the violation notice and asked where the evidence was. Diane pulled up my account and said Lori filed the complaint yesterday afternoon and attached a signed witness statement. I asked to see it. Diane said it was confidential board material. I said I had a right to see accusations against me. Diane sighed and said she would ask the board president. The board president, a semi-retired guy named Mark, called me an hour later. He said Lori provided a witness statement and a verbal confession record. I said there was no confession. Mark said Lori was very clear and the complaint followed procedure. I asked if there was any physical evidence. Mark said the missing items were clubhouse signage pieces, and they were discovered missing during inventory 2 days ago. I said I did not take them. Mark said Lori saw me with the items in my hands and dared me to prove a negative. I told him I had doorbell footage and gate logs. Mark said that was circumstantial and did not disprove anything. He said the fine stood unless I paid or requested a formal hearing, which would cost me $300 to file. I printed the gate fob log and saved the doorbell footage to a USB drive. The footage showed me on my couch at midnight. The gate log showed my fob was not used. I also pulled the metadata creation date on the violation notice email, and it was timestamped 6 hours before Lori claimed to see me in the parking area. That meant she filed the complaint before the alleged sighting. That was clue 1. The next day, a tow truck arrived in my driveway. The driver, a younger guy with a clipboard, knocked on my door and said he had an authorization from the Desert Palms HOA to impound my car for unpaid fines. I stepped outside and asked to see the authorization. He handed me a printed work order. It was signed by Lori Hastings, and it listed my unit number and license plate. The order said I owed $750 and was in violation of community rules. I told the driver I disputed the fine and had evidence. He said he did not care about disputes, he just followed orders. I asked who gave the order. He said the HOA vice president called his company directly and told him to tow unless I paid on the spot. I pulled out my phone and called the tow company office. The dispatcher said the order came through yesterday and was flagged as urgent. I asked if the HOA had a contract with them. The dispatcher said they were a preferred vendor, but the final call was always theirs. I asked what the authorization rules were. The dispatcher said any board officer could request a tow, but it had to match HOA records. I asked if she could verify my account balance with the HOA. She said she would call me back. Lori pulled up in her car while the driver was waiting. She got out, slammed her door, and walked up with her key ring jingling. She said the tow was happening, and I could pay her directly or watch my car leave. I said the dispatcher was verifying the balance. Lori said she did not care, and she had the authority. The driver looked between us. Lori pulled out a laminated sheet and waved it at him. She said it was HOA policy and he had to follow it. The driver asked if I was refusing to pay. I said I was disputing the charge. Lori said that did not matter. The driver said he needed to wait for his office to call back. Lori turned to me and said my timeline was irrelevant. She said I confessed, and the board voted to escalate enforcement. I asked when the board voted. She said 2 days ago. I said that was before the complaint was filed. Lori paused, then said the vote was retroactive. I asked how a vote could be retroactive. She said I am the one who decides what counts. The dispatcher called back. She said the HOA account showed a balance of $500, not $750. The driver asked Lori about the discrepancy. Lori said the additional fees were processing charges. The dispatcher said there were no processing charges on file. Lori said she added them this morning. The dispatcher said she needed written confirmation from the management office. Lori said she was a board officer and that was enough. The dispatcher said it was not. The driver got back in his truck and left. Lori turned on me and said I just made it worse. She said she would file a harassment complaint and get my business license revoked. I asked how I harassed her. She said I questioned her authority in front of a vendor. I stayed quiet. She got in her car and drove off. I called the city business licensing office and asked if an HOA could request a license review. The clerk said a complaint had to include evidence of criminal activity or zoning violations. I asked if accusations were enough. She said no, they needed documentation. I thanked her and hung up. That afternoon, Angela, the neighbor from the mailbox cluster, knocked on my door. She said she needed to talk. I let her in. She said Lori cornered her yesterday in the parking lot and told her to sign a witness statement saying I was acting suspicious near the clubhouse. Angela said she refused. Lori said if Angela did not sign, she would be added to the investigation as an uncooperative resident. Angela signed. She said she felt sick about it and wanted me to know. I asked if she saw me near the clubhouse. She said no, she never saw me. I thanked her and told her I was gathering evidence. That was clue 2. Lori was pressuring residents to manufacture complaints. Angela was not the only one. I asked her if Lori mentioned anyone else. Angela said there was a guy named Carlos who also signed. I asked if she knew why. Angela said Carlos works nights and was barely home, so he would sign anything to avoid conflict. I wrote down his name. I went back to the management office. Diane was at her desk. I asked if I could request copies of the witness statements filed against me. Diane said those were confidential. I said I had a right to see accusations used in enforcement. Diane said she would have to ask Mark again. I said fine, but I also wanted to file a formal records request under Florida Public Records Law. Diane looked annoyed and said the HOA was private, not public. I said the management company handles public services like trash and roads, so some records were subject to disclosure. Diane said she would check with their attorney. 2 hours later, I got an email with scanned copies of 3 witness statements. One was signed by Angela. One was signed by Carlos. One was signed by Ed, the older guy who walked past during the first confrontation. All 3 were on identical template forms with the same formatting, the same date box layout, and the same signature line spacing. That was clue 3. The complaints were manufactured using a template, and the template was created before any witness saw anything. I saved the scans and zoomed in. The metadata creation date on all 3 PDFs was the same, and it was 6 hours before Lori claimed to see me in the parking area. I called Angela and asked if she remembered what time Lori gave her the form. Angela said it was around 3 p.m. 2 days ago. I asked if the form was blank when she got it. Angela said no, it already had her name filled in at the top. I asked if Lori filled it in. Angela said yes. Lori printed it in front of her from a laptop. I thanked her again. I pulled the email metadata on my original violation notice. It was sent at 9 a.m. 2 days ago. Lori claimed to see me at midnight, which was 15 hours later. That meant the notice was drafted and sent before the alleged crime even happened. I added that to my evidence folder. The next morning, Lori was waiting at my driveway again. She had her clipboard, her rolling cart, and a handheld radio clipped to her belt. She keyed the radio and said she was on scene at the suspect residence. No one responded. She keyed it again and said she needed a status update on the tow authorization. No one responded. She looked at me and said dispatch was busy. I said that was not a real radio. She said it was HOA security frequency. I said the HOA did not have a security frequency. She said I am the one who decides what counts. She said the board was meeting tonight and voting to suspend my access to all community amenities until I paid. I said that was selective enforcement. She said it was policy. I asked to see the policy. She flipped through a binder on her cart and pulled out a laminated sheet. She pointed at a section and said it was right there. I asked to take a picture. She said no. I asked why. She said it was proprietary. I said HOA rules were not proprietary. She slammed a stamp on her clipboard like a judge and said the discussion was over. I went to the tow yard where the driver worked. The office was a small trailer behind a chain-link lot full of impounded cars. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with glasses, was at the desk. I asked if I could speak to someone about authorization rules. She asked if I was the Desert Palms guy. I said yes. She said Lori called again this morning and tried to authorize another tow. I asked what happened. She said they told her no. Lori said she would report them to the HOA board and get their contract canceled. The clerk said they did not have a contract, they were just a preferred vendor, and preferred did not mean required. I asked if Lori understood that. The clerk said Lori screamed into the phone for 5 minutes and then hung up. I asked if the clerk could give me a written statement. She said she could not, but she could confirm what Lori said if someone official asked. I asked if that meant police. She said yes. I thanked her and left. If you are enjoying this story, hit like and subscribe for more HOA justice content. I filed a police report for harassment and false accusation. The deputy who took the report, a young guy in his 20s, asked if I had evidence. I showed him the doorbell footage, the gate log, the witness statement metadata, and the violation notice timestamp. He looked through it and said it was compelling, but it was a civil matter unless Lori committed fraud or theft. I asked what would count as theft. He said if she actually stole the missing items and framed me. I said I suspected she did. He said I needed proof. I said I was working on it. He gave me an incident report number and said to call if anything escalated. That night I got an email from Mark, the board president. He said the board voted to suspend my pool, gym, and clubhouse access until I resolved the fine. I replied and attached all my evidence. I said the complaint was fabricated, the timeline did not match, and Lori was pressuring witnesses. Mark replied 1 hour later and said the board reviewed my evidence and found it insufficient. He said Lori's statement was credible and the fine stood. I asked if he looked at the metadata timestamps. He said metadata could be manipulated. I said the gate log could not. He said the log only showed my fob, not my physical location. I said that was true, but Lori had no evidence I was in the parking area at all. Mark did not reply. The next morning, Lori was at the mailbox cluster again. This time she had 2 other residents with her, both older women I recognized from board meetings. Lori waved me over. I walked up. She said she wanted to clarify the situation in front of witnesses. I said fine. She said I confessed to theft 2 days ago on my driveway, and she recorded it. I said she did not record anything because nothing happened. Lori said I was lying. I asked her to show the recording. She said it was on her phone. I said show it. She said she did not have her phone. I said then there was no recording. Lori turned to the 2 women and said I was being hostile. One of them, a woman named Sharon, said she heard I confessed. I asked who told her that. Sharon said Lori did. I asked if Sharon saw me confess. Sharon said no. I asked if she saw any evidence. Sharon said no. I said then she heard a rumor. Lori said it was not a rumor. I said prove it. Lori pulled out her phone and said she had a recording of me acting suspicious. I said let me see it. She opened her camera roll and scrolled. She held up a video but the screen was facing away from me. I asked her to turn it around. She said no. I asked the other women if they could see the screen. They both said no. Lori said the recording was clear and that was enough. I said it was not. Lori said I was harassing her. I stayed quiet. That afternoon I got a call from Carlos, the night shift worker who signed one of the witness statements. He said he needed to talk. I met him at a coffee shop near the community gate. Carlos said Lori called him yesterday and told him to change his story. I asked what she meant. Carlos said Lori wanted him to say he saw me taking boxes from the clubhouse storage closet. Carlos said he never saw that. I asked why Lori wanted him to say it. Carlos said she was trying to build a timeline. I asked if he told her no. Carlos said he did, and Lori said she would report him for violating community quiet hours because he came home late from work. Carlos said he worked nights, so of course he came home late. I said that was retaliation. Carlos said he knew, but he could not afford to fight the HOA. I asked if he would be willing to tell the police. Carlos said maybe, if it did not get back to Lori. I called the deputy and gave him Carlos's number. The deputy said he would follow up. I asked if this changed anything. The deputy said it helped, but he still needed proof that Lori stole the items. I said I was looking. That night I went to the clubhouse. It was locked, but the management office had given me a key when I moved in. I let myself in and went to the storage closet. The closet was full of boxes labeled with color-coded stickers, no readable text. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. One box was open, and inside were HOA parking signs. The signs were identical to the ones Lori claimed were stolen. I took a picture of the box label. The label had a delivery date from last week. That meant the signs were never stolen, they were still here. I checked the other boxes. One box had a torn mailer with a return address sticker. The sticker had the HOA name on it. Inside the box were smaller items, random clubhouse supplies. I took pictures of everything. I also checked the closet log, a clipboard hanging on the back of the door. The log had entries from the past 2 weeks. Lori's name was on the log 4 times, always marked as inventory check. The last entry was 2 days ago, the same day she filed the complaint. I took a picture of the log. I left the clubhouse and went home. I emailed Diane and asked if Lori had access to the storage closet. Diane replied and said yes, all board officers had keys. I asked if there was any record of what Lori removed during her inventory checks. Diane said no. Inventory was self-reported. I asked if that was normal. Diane said it was HOA policy. I said that was a problem. Diane did not reply. The next morning I went back to the tow yard. The clerk was at the desk again. I asked if Lori had called recently. The clerk said yes, she called an hour ago and tried to get them to refuse me service unless I paid the HOA fees. I asked what that meant. The clerk said Lori claimed I was banned from using any vendor affiliated with the HOA, including towing. I asked if that was real. The clerk said no. Vendors were independent contractors and the HOA could not ban residents from private services. I asked if Lori understood that. The clerk said she did not care. I asked if the clerk would be willing to write that down. The clerk said she already did. She handed me a typed statement with her signature. The statement said Lori Hastings attempted to intimidate the tow company into denying service to a resident without legal cause. I thanked her and added it to my evidence folder. That afternoon, the sealed shipment of HOA signage pieces arrived. The delivery driver dropped it at the clubhouse. Lori was there waiting. She signed for it, then loaded it into her car. I watched from across the parking lot. She saw me and waved. She said the shipment was HOA property and she was taking it for safekeeping. I asked where. She said that was not my business. I took a picture of her car with the boxes visible in the back seat. I called the deputy and told him what happened. He said that was not theft because Lori signed for the shipment as a board officer. I asked if she was allowed to take it home. He said that depended on HOA policy. I said the policy was vague. He said then it was still civil. I asked what I needed to make it criminal. He said proof that Lori took items for personal use and lied about it. I said I had pictures of the storage closet showing the signs were never stolen. He said that was good, but it did not prove Lori took them. I said she had access and motive. He said motive was not proof. I hung up. That night, I printed every piece of evidence and assembled it into a binder. Doorbell footage stills, gate log, violation notice metadata, witness statement templates with creation dates, storage closet pictures, delivery confirmation, tow company statement, and the police incident report number. I labeled the binder with colored tabs and put it in my car. The next morning, Lori called and said she was coming to my house to collect the fine in person. I said I was not paying. She said then she would authorize another tow, and this time the driver would not leave. I said the tow company already refused her. She said she had other vendors. I said I would call the police if she trespassed. She said I was threatening her. I said I was not. She said she was recording the call. I hung up. 10 minutes later, a different tow truck pulled up in my driveway. The driver got out and knocked. I opened the door. He said he had an authorization to tow my car. I asked who authorized it. He said the HOA vice president. I asked if he verified the balance with the management office. He said no. He was told it was urgent. I said I disputed the charge and had evidence. He said he did not care about disputes. I pulled out my phone and called the police non-emergency line. The driver heard me and got back in his truck. He left before I finished the call. Lori called again. She said I just committed harassment by calling the police on her vendor. I said the vendor was on my property without verification. She said the verification was her authorization. I said her authorization was not valid. She said I am the one who decides what counts. I said not anymore. I hung up. I drove to the management office. Diane was at her desk. I walked in with my evidence binder. Diane looked up and said she was not taking any more complaints. I said I was not filing a complaint, I was delivering proof that Lori fabricated the theft accusation and pressured witnesses. Diane sighed and said she already told the board about my evidence. I said the board did not see all of it. I opened the binder and showed her the witness statement metadata, the storage closet pictures, and the tow company statement. Diane looked through it. She said it was compelling, but she could not overrule the board. I asked who could. She said the board president or a majority vote. I said Mark already refused. Diane said then I needed to wait for the next board meeting. I asked when that was. She said 3 weeks. I said that was too long. Diane said there was nothing she could do. I left and drove to the tow yard. The clerk was at her desk. I asked if I could speak to the owner. She said he was in the back. She called him out. The owner, a heavy-set guy in his 50s, came to the counter. I introduced myself and explained the situation. I showed him the tow company statement his clerk wrote. He read it and nodded. He said Lori had been calling nonstop for 3 days and threatening to get them blacklisted. I asked if that was legal. He said no, it was harassment. I asked if he would be willing to confront her. He said he already tried, and she hung up on him. I asked if he would be willing to refuse her orders in front of witnesses. He said yes, if she showed up in person. I called Lori and told her I was at the tow yard and wanted to resolve the dispute face to face. She said fine, she would be there in 10 minutes. I waited in the parking lot. The owner waited inside. Lori pulled up and got out of her car. She walked over with her clipboard and her rolling cart. She said she wanted this on the record. I said fine. I pulled out my tablet and opened the storage closet pictures. I turned the screen toward her. I said the signs she claimed were stolen were still in the clubhouse, and the box was never opened until I checked it. Lori looked at the screen. She said that did not prove anything. I said it proved there was no theft. Lori said I could have taken the signs and put them back. I said the delivery date on the box was last week, after she filed the complaint. Lori said dates could be faked. I said the box was sealed when I found it. Lori said I was lying. I pulled up the gate log and showed her the timestamp. I said my fob was not used the night she claimed to see me. Lori said I could have walked. I said the gate was locked, and walking out would have triggered the exit sensor. Lori said the sensor could be broken. I said it was not. I pulled up the witness statement metadata and showed her the creation date. I said all 3 statements were created before any witness saw anything. Lori said metadata could be manipulated. I said not by 3 different people using the same template. The tow yard owner stepped out of the office. He said he heard enough. He told Lori his company would not take any more orders from her. Lori turned and said he was violating the HOA vendor agreement. The owner said there was no agreement, just a preferred vendor list, and being preferred did not mean required. Lori said she would report him to the board. The owner said go ahead. Lori said she would get him blacklisted. The owner said she already tried, and it did not work. Lori looked at me and said this was not over. I said it was. I drove to the police station and asked to speak to the deputy who took my original report. He came out to the lobby. I showed him the tablet with all the evidence. He looked through it and said it was solid. I asked if it was enough to charge Lori. He said it was enough to investigate. I asked what that meant. He said he would follow up with the witnesses and the management office, and if Lori lied to authorities, that was a crime. I asked how long it would take. He said a few days. I thanked him and left. That night I got a call from Angela. She said Lori came to her apartment and tried to get her to recant her statement to me. Angela said no. Lori said if Angela did not cooperate, she would file a noise complaint and get Angela fined. Angela said she called the police. I asked if they came. Angela said yes, and they told Lori to leave. Angela said Lori left, but she was furious. I told Angela to document everything. She said she already did. The next day, the deputy called. He said he interviewed Carlos, Angela, and Ed. All 3 confirmed they were pressured by Lori to sign statements. He also spoke to Diane at the management office. Diane confirmed the violation notice was sent before Lori claimed to see me. The deputy said that was enough to file a harassment complaint against Lori, and possibly fraud if the investigation showed she stole the items herself. I asked what happened next. He said the HOA would be notified and Lori would be questioned. I asked if she would be removed from the board. He said that was up to the HOA. I thanked him and hung up. That afternoon, I got an email from Mark, the board president. He said the board was informed of the police investigation and was conducting an internal review. He said Lori was suspended from board duties pending the outcome. I replied and asked if my fines would be refunded. Mark said the board would vote on it at the next meeting. I said the fines were fraudulent and should be reversed immediately. Mark said he understood, but procedure required a vote. I said fine. 2 days later, the deputy called again. He said the investigation found that Lori took the sealed shipment of signage pieces home and lied about it being stolen. The delivery driver confirmed Lori signed for the shipment and loaded it into her car. The deputy also found that Lori had taken other items from the clubhouse over the past 6 months, including petty cash and supplies. The storage closet log showed her name on multiple inventory checks with no corresponding records of what was removed. The deputy said that was theft and Lori was being charged. I asked if that meant she would be arrested. He said yes once the warrant was issued. I asked how long. He said within the week. I thanked him. 3 days later, I got an email from Diane. She said the board held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Lori from her role as vice president. The board also voted to refund my fines and issue a written no-contact directive against Lori. The directive said Lori was not allowed to approach me, contact me, or discuss me with other residents. Diane said the directive was enforceable under HOA rules and would be sent to all residents as a community safety alert. I replied and asked if the HOA would issue a public correction about the theft accusation. Diane said yes, a notice would be sent clarifying that I was not involved and the accusation was false. I said that was not enough. I wanted an apology. Diane said the board would discuss it. The next day I got a call from Mark. He said the board agreed to require Lori to apologize on the record in front of witnesses. I asked when. Mark said the apology would happen at the next board meeting, which was in 2 weeks. I said I wanted it sooner. Mark said the meeting was already scheduled, and moving it would require a quorum. I said fine. 2 weeks later, I went to the board meeting. It was held in the clubhouse, and about 20 residents were there. Lori was sitting in the back row. She looked furious. Mark called the meeting to order and said the first item was the public apology. He called Lori to the front. Lori stood and walked to the podium. She did not look at me. Mark handed her a prepared statement. Lori read it in a flat voice. She said she falsely accused me of theft, pressured witnesses to sign fabricated statements, and misused her authority as a board officer. She said she apologized for the harm caused and accepted full responsibility. The room was silent. Mark said the apology was accepted on behalf of the board. Lori sat down. Mark then said the board conducted a full audit of clubhouse inventory and found multiple discrepancies tied to Lori's access. The missing items included signage, petty cash, and supplies. The total value was estimated at $1,200. The board voted to pursue restitution through the criminal case. Mark also said the police incident number was on file, and any resident could request a copy from the management office. That was the moment the rumor died in real time as people watched the proof. After the meeting, several residents came up to me and apologized for believing the accusation. One of them, Sharon, said she felt terrible for repeating the rumor. I told her it was not her fault, and Lori was convincing. Sharon said she should have asked for proof. I said most people do not. A week later, Lori was arrested. The warrant was issued for theft and fraud. The charges included stealing HOA property, filing false reports, and intimidating witnesses. The case was assigned to the state attorney. I was listed as a victim and a witness. The deputy called and said the trial would likely be months away, but the evidence was strong. The HOA refunded my fines, restored my access, and sent a community-wide notice clarifying that I was falsely accused. The notice said Lori Hastings was removed from the board and charged with crimes related to theft and fraud. The notice also said residents who signed witness statements under pressure were not at fault and would not face retaliation. I kept my evidence binder in my car for weeks, just in case. I also installed a second doorbell camera facing the street. I was not taking chances. A few months later, I ran into the tow yard owner at a gas station. He said Lori tried to get him blacklisted again after her arrest, but the HOA ignored her. He said his company was still on the preferred vendor list, and business was good. I told him I appreciated his help. He said it was the right thing to do, and he was glad she got caught. Carlos moved out a few months later. He said the drama was too much, and he found a place without an HOA. I did not blame him. Angela stayed. She said she felt safer knowing Lori was gone. She also said the new board vice president was reasonable and did not play games. I agreed. The trial happened almost a year later. Lori pleaded no contest to theft and fraud. She was sentenced to probation, community service, and restitution. The restitution included the $1,200 in missing items, plus my legal fees and the cost of the police investigation. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order preventing Lori from holding any HOA leadership position in Florida. I got a check from the state attorney's office 6 months after that. It covered my refunded fines, my legal consultation fees, and a portion of the investigation costs. The check was signed by the clerk of court. I deposited it and moved on. The HOA is quieter now. The new board is less aggressive, and the rules are enforced evenly. I still get the occasional violation notice for minor things like trash can placement, but nothing like what Lori pulled. I pay attention to deadlines, keep my records, and stay out of HOA drama. I still have the evidence binder. I keep it in my office as a reminder that documentation wins, and bullies lose when you make them prove their lies. I will talk to you again soon.